Welcome to the program. Well, it's good to have you. This is, you're working on the community solar stuff, but I didn't even know this. Right now, if you want solar, you're going to be paying whatever the utilities decide you're going to be paying for the rate based on massive subsidized projects that many people don't want that cover many miles. This is different, but we're not allowed to have it. So explain.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on. You're absolutely right. You know, when conservatives like us hear solar, our hackles tend to go up, and that's because we're thinking of these large-scale utility projects that are heavily subsidized by taxpayers, often come in under what they're estimated to produce. But this is different, as you say. This is a method for private individuals, whether it be a farmer, whether it be a company like Walmart with a lot of roof space, to put up their own solar panels, their own solar arrays at their own cost, and allow folks in the community to subscribe to that and see reductions potentially in their energy bills. So, as we look at the state of Wisconsin with the second highest energy costs in the Midwest and the top 20 highest energy costs nationwide, we look at our utility monopoly, as you say, we see this as an important way around it. There's a bill in the legislature right now that supports it, and it's important to sort of differentiate it from what we think of as solar. This is private sector, this is free market, and it's a completely different approach.
So would you tie in, assuming this would be authorized, which is not authorized right now? The only community solar you ever hear about in Wisconsin is actually utilities. The utilities
Correct.
are doing it, and you're not saving a nickel. So when you hear it now, it doesn't exist. It has the potential to be like prepper heaven stuff, okay? But must you tie into the utility? Is it something that if things go sideways, you and your fellow subscribers could, potentially be able to eke out electricity at a time when things are very up and down in the grid?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and that's another attractive angle here. We're looking at rolling blackouts in Wisconsin, in the near future, and part of that is because we've taken things like coal offline and replaced it with less reliable things like solar. But we're looking at these rolling blackouts. This could be a way for one to reduce pressure on the grid, because the more folks that subscribe, the less pressure there is on the actual utility power. And two, potentially in those events, yes, this could provide some alternatives for sure.
See, now you're talking, okay? Because solar, in the way we conceive solar in the United States, is stupid. Solar as a backup when things go sideways is something a lot of people think makes a lot of sense. In fact, I know people who have solar arrays, individual solar arrays, which are legal, but they're also expensive because the whole cost is on you. They can't say, "Hey, neighbors, look what we did here. Would you like to subscribe?" And we would share our excess electricity with you. Not allowed in Wisconsin, is it?
No, absolutely not. And you're right. The initial costs of solar are super high. We had those ridiculous subsidies under Obama that may have lowered the cost, but those thankfully are going away. So if folks want these, if we don't allow something like community solar, they have to bear those costs themselves. But yeah, this is a way to have someone make the investment, and then your sort of neighbors, your folks in your community can benefit from it without having to go through the cost themselves of putting up a solar array on their roof or in their yard or something like that.
So you've got a small manufacturer with a large rooftop. This is you just think of how this could work. You've got a large manufacturer with a small manufacturer with a large rooftop. This is a way to help that manufacturer maybe get by during recession times, but it's also a way for people to be able to rely on something that isn't explicitly utility tied. Why don't we allow this already? I mean, we basically don't allow the metering, right? If you do this, you just can't find a way to do the metering.
Exactly. The thing we started with, the utility monopoly, is the reason that we don't have this right there. Like everything else that we discuss on here with public education and the education monopoly, there simply is a fear and a dislike of any sort of competition. And, that's why it's a tough hill to climb to get any of these things done. But, that is the reason behind it. They don't like the competition. They want to keep their monopoly. It's anti-free market, and it doesn't really benefit anyone but the utilities themselves.
So we can't tie into it somebody who does this because the utilities say we can't, because the utilities refuse to let them meter. They refuse to let any competition meter their electricity so that we could purchase it from that person or subscribe and either get it in the form of a rebate or however that would work. That would have to be worked out in legislation. Just not allowed here. So I'm wondering how those mini nuclear facilities are going to work for these data centers in a state like Wisconsin. It sounds like you're not going to be able to allow it because we don't have a state law that says you can individually meter.
You're absolutely right. When we think about, the increased stress on the grid that's going to come from these data centers, there's really no viable way right now for them to produce, their own electricity and make it reasonable for them to, from a financial standpoint to do it because of our lack of this ability. So,
Yep.
We see this not only for, wind and for solar, but it can be for other forms of electricity as well. And we see this sort of as an entry point to expand those options for behind the meter electricity production more broadly.
This gets you, you talk about getting off the grid. You can't. Unless you have the money to install, and by the way, solar is, personal solar, maybe you get a day or two in a dark part of the year, but it can be a very big challenge and extremely costly. You've got to buy inverters. You've got to buy all this crazy stuff to support it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to sort of be very highly technically skilled, which is why so few people do it. It's very, it's just tough. Maybe you get 5 or 6 guys. Maybe they used to work for the utilities. They say, hey, we can pull this off. We can make this accessible for people who just want to, tie in individually outside the utility. My sense is you're probably not going to get a lot of lobbyist support for this, even though it makes sense. And it in times when times get tough, it might not be a bad thing to have as a backup.
Absolutely. And, there are folks on the other side, right? You talked about the small scale manufacturer. You think about companies like Walmart out there that, that have large roof space. So there are, and the data center folks, there are folks that do see the attraction of this, but as you said, it's absolutely an uphill battle. It's going to be challenging as when there's anything that sort of touches the utilities in the state and across the country. But we do think, because it's common sense, because we ought to be doing more things to generate more electricity production. We're hopeful that this might be one of the things that can sort of circumvent that elephant in the room for once.
Exactly, and it shouldn't just be, limited to solar. Solar is easy because the concept of community solar is in how many states? A bunch of states actually allow people to do this.
Including some conservative ones like Virginia. Yep.
Yeah, Glenn Youngkin just very recently signed legislation. So which isn't to say it's off to the races, but it's out there as an option. As somebody who I think properly calls herself a prepper, it's quite appealing. But what is not appealing is to have to be beholden to the monopoly utility. And that is where we are right now. So data centers, they're beholden to the monopoly utility. We, the people, are beholden to the monopoly utility. We just absolutely, we've got the Public Service Commissioner. We've got Citizens Utility Board. They do nothing to help police the rates. The PSC does nothing. If they want a guaranteed rate increase because they have a guaranteed profit built into state law, they're getting it. They tell us how much energy we can consume and energy we can generate, and that's bunk.
Yeah, and as you think about, we mentioned manufacturers, you could also mention, folks don't like giant utility scale stuff on farmland. But one attractive thing here is that, if there's a small part of a farm that's not being used, a farmer can use that and actually create some additional revenue for themselves and for their neighbors, even in more rural parts of the state. So this isn't just for, urban areas with manufacturing facilities. This works really anywhere in the state for folks that want to be a little bit more off the grid and see a reduction in their electric bills.
Sure, and you're, I would imagine in the small scale farming operations, which a lot of people don't like when farms are covered in solar panels. They're ugly for the most part, but on rooftops, you can't see them. But when you see them in a farm field, it really bothers people. If you don't see them in the mass scale, like if you think of the 8 miles they want to put in Christiana, or if you think of I think it's 4.5 or 5 miles near Germantown, people don't like that, but they're also being told tough, because their utilities are the ones doing it. The utilities are behind these projects. And in this case, it would be the people. If the people don't like it, they tell the farmer no. Sorry, farmer.
There's local
farmer
control here, right? We don't go through PSC. It's your local community. So, the folks in the local community have much more say and much more control over what would happen in those instances than what we see with these utility projects, for sure.
Well, I must say, I'm going to be pessimistic that this is going to get anywhere, but I'm optimistic that people are talking about this, disconnecting from the monopoly and giving people options to disconnect from the monopoly, by the way, which would also pave the way for those mini nuclear facilities for data center electricity generation, so that they're not tapping into our natural gas and causing all of our rates to go sky high. It also kind of takes the bite out of some of those massive green energy projects that the utilities want us to pay for, because we might be able to, I don't know, save 10, 15% if we actually had a project like this in our community. Well, I like it. I must say, I can't believe I like it, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it.
I was surprised
like
as well, and nothing is frozen over yet, as far as we know. So we're on the same page here. Good to look into things a little deeper sometimes. Eh?
The lobbyists have not sharpened their pencils or their knives. Good to have you on the program, Will. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Have a great day.